Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Health and Wellbeing right here on Facebook Live. This is where we discuss all the things that could affect us as we navigate our way through COVID-19. As usual, I want to start with our scripture verse, which is taken from 3 John 1, verse 2. Wow. I pray for good fortune in everything you do and for your good health, that your everyday affairs prosper as well as your soul. And that was from the Message version. I try to read the new version every week so that we get a full understanding of what the scripture is saying. But what it boils down to is that God wants us to prosper and do well in every area of our lives, spirit, soul, and body. And that is what we want for you too. And that's why we do this program every week. This is week 10, and we're so grateful to God for your lives. Okay, today I have an outstanding young lady as my guest. I have known her since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. In fact, knee-high to a grasshopper, but never mind.
I am.
Let me tell you a little bit about Chanel Dennis. She is an accredited cognitive behavioral psychotherapist, CBT for short. That's her profession, and she has years of clinical experience. She has recently started her clinical psychology doctorate. So when she's finished that, she will be a doctor. Yes. Chanel currently works as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist in the counseling and mental well-being department at a university right here in Birmingham. She has worked on a variety of very complex mental health issues, including substance misuse disorders, and has developed an area of expertise with the area of anxiety. So please, to all our viewers and those who are listening, send us your questions, anything that you'd like to know, questions you'd like to have answered. It could be for you, it could be for a friend, but don't stay silent. Please participate and join in the conversation. So Chanel, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
About health and well-being. It's wonderful to have you. So listen, tell us a little bit more about what you do, and also share with us exactly what CBT is.
Okay, well, thank you for that lovely introduction. I think you gave a really good overview of what I do. So I'm a psychotherapist, so I work with mental health issues, so anyone experiencing any sort of mental health disorder. Most commonly, I've been working with like depression, anxiety, trauma, and the more common anxiety disorders like OCD and PTSD. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Mm-hmm. And CBT, so it's a specific type of therapy, and it focuses a lot on how we think. So our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, where they come from, how they develop, and the impact they can play in contributing to mental health issues, so difficulties like anxiety and depression. And we also look at...
So you're actually looking at the root thoughts that causes those issues.
Yeah. So with CBT, it's very much present focus. So whilst we may look at the root cause and look at where that comes from in terms of childhood or early experiences, we're very much focused on the here and now. So this is where it came from, but this is the impact it's having on me right now. What can I do about it?
Oh, wow.
And we also look at behavior as well then. So sometimes we get into unhelpful behavior patterns, and we look at both of those things then. So our thoughts and our behavior and how they can contribute to the development of a mental illness, and what we can do to change those in order to change the difficulties we may be experiencing with our mental health. So it's a very practical type of therapy. And it's a little bit different from like traditional counselling, where counselling allows you to more kind of explore and talk through those difficulties in a lot of detail. CBT does that, but it's also, okay, what can I do about it as well?
Wow. I'm aware that as Christians, we can be very suspicious about this kind of therapy. is there anything that we need to be afraid of as a Christian going? No. Okay.
Short and simple, no. No,
Yeah.
I just feel like with therapy in general, especially the type of therapy that I do, I liken it to medicine. And when we're feeling unwell physically, we feel okay going to the doctor and talking to them about our physical health problems. We feel okay going to the specialist in whatever area that may be and following the advice that they give and or the medication that they prescribe. And I feel like it's the exact same thing for mental health as well. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone, and that's what's going to help you with your difficulty. So I don't think as Christians we should be wary about it. I feel like it's something that we should do more of, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think though that, again, as a church, and I'm talking about the church across the board, we don't have a really good record with helping people with mental health issues. How can we change that?
Yeah. Do you know, I feel like with church and Christianity overall, like you said, across the board, I feel like it's just maybe how traditionally mental health issues have been viewed and how they've been kind of addressed and talked about. And Pastor Yvonne, you can maybe speak more about it, but I feel like back in the day, more so mental health was seen as, you know, being possessed by the devil, or, you know, all of those kind of issues. It was seen as, it was really frowned upon. So therefore, when people demonic. Whereas so now I feel like now as we're moving on and time has moved on, I feel like we're now seeing it for what it is. And not to say that there's never any kind of maybe spiritual roots in some of the mental health issues that we're experiencing, but I feel like people are beginning to see it for what it is, and therefore feel more comfortable to talk about it and feel more comfortable to address it. But because of the culture and the history that it's come from, I feel like it's very difficult for us to talk about it in church. But I feel like I definitely notice a difference in how we address it now, and we're beginning to feel more comfortable about talking about it.
Yeah, we need to get there.
Yeah.
Because we need our help, and we have to position ourselves to help in a real, tangible way. Okay. So before we start talking about anxiety in a deeper sense, I'm just wondering, what type of interventions is involved with CBT?
So it can vary, it really can vary. And maybe I'll probably talk about them a little bit more in detail, depending on the type of questions that you have. But as an example for anxiety, a common thing that we do is something called exposure therapy. And with exposure therapy, it's about gradually trying to expose yourself to anxiety-provoking situations in a way for you to begin to learn what that issue actually is, your ability to cope with that situation, and also to challenge some of your thoughts. And I guess a very simple way of saying that, let's say someone had a phobia of a spider, for example, and that completely had a massive impact on how they were living their lives. They were avoiding things, they couldn't do anything, and they would just be in hysterics if they saw a spider. Exposure therapy would be about gradually exposing themselves to being able to kind of be around a spider. So it might just be something simple like maybe starting off with looking at an image of a spider. It might develop into something like looking at a video of a spider, to eventually actually being in the same room as a spider. So that's exposure therapy, gradual exposure to anxiety-provoking situations. Do we just get a little feature from your granddaughter?
Yes. She can say goodbye. She's going home now.
Nice.
Okay, so again, that's very helpful. I think the more we can put information out there for people to see, the more likely it is that they will actually seek an intervention, because it's actually going to help them and not harm them.
Yeah.
I remember recently, since the COVID lockdown, there was somebody that was having some issues, and they wouldn't seek for help because they thought men in white jackets were going to come and take them away, which I think is really a disservice to mental health treatments these days, because I haven't seen men in white coats for a long time.
Yeah.
I used to a lot. Because of course I used to work in the psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
But nowadays I think there's a more modern approach, and so I am really keen on the church itself across the board, positioning herself to help people and to lead them to seeking proper help and guidance. And there's a role for the church to play, but I don't think that we can take the main role, especially if somebody's psychotic or they have other kind of crises that actually needs a medical intervention. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead, and I want to ask you this question. What exactly is anxiety? Because I think people think anxiety is when you're worried because you're going to fly on air, it's just a mild something. You're just a little bit anxious because you're going to fly. You've never flown before. But I want you to talk about the different type of anxiety, the scale, for example, from one to the other, how it can really affect people in their lives.
So anxiety, it's what I call an umbrella term. So anxiety can mean lots of different things for lots of different people. So underneath anxiety, there could be something like PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Could be something like you just mentioned there with the worry, so generalized anxiety disorder. It could be social anxiety, it could be OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It means lots of different things, but I guess anxiety in itself is that feeling that you have. So that feeling of unease, that feeling of fear, that feeling of worry, that can be mild or severe for different people. Mm-hmm. And I think often when people say they're feeling anxious, they're talking about those physical sensations that you sometimes feel with anxiety. So maybe they're having that kind of knot in their stomach, or their heart's racing, or they're just feeling a bit on edge or a bit unsure about something. But anxiety can then become disorders in different ways depending on the person and the difficulty they're experiencing and the problem that they're having. But it's normal. We all have anxiety, and we all would have experienced anxiety at some point in our life. So like when you're about to sit an exam, or when you're having an interview, even something like this can cause a bit of anxiety, and that's a totally normal and natural experience. And I would say if we're thinking about that scale, that's probably the mild 0 to 1 scale, up to the 8, 9, 10, which would be something like the PTSD, could be something like the OCD and the social anxiety. So anxiety in itself isn't a problem. We all experience it. It's when it becomes severe that it becomes a disorder, and that's becomes something that we can work with.
So if we didn't actually experience any type of anxiety in any given situation, that would not be normal.
Yeah.
So can anxiety...
It's actually quite dangerous, because anxiety keeps us safe. It's actually our fight or flight mechanism. So you might have heard of that. So it's literally the fight or flight response being released, which is adrenaline being released into our body. And before, we needed that in order to literally keep ourselves safe from dangerous things. But now we have triggers like our bills are stressing us, or our children are going through difficulties, or we're having life difficulties, which trigger off that same response, which cause anxiety. But it is something that's literally designed to keep us safe. So we need it. If we didn't have anxiety, we would never really, we'd go to interviews feeling, oh, it's okay, I don't care what happens. Or, we'd go to exams thinking, oh, I don't care what happens. We wouldn't really care about anything. So actually feeling anxious is a sign that you're passionate about something, that you care about something, that something's important to you. And if we didn't have it, I think life would be very difficult for a lot of people.
Wow. So anxiety then could actually enhance our performance.
Yeah.
Wow.
100%. And I say that to people all the time, because they often think anxiety is a bad thing. And anxiety, if you think and reflect on your life, how often anxiety has been helpful for you, you can start to think, oh yeah, like when I had that interview, like if I wasn't feeling anxious about getting a job, then I probably wouldn't have prepared as well as I did. Or if I wasn't anxious about getting a good grade in an exam, then I wouldn't have studied as hard as I did. Or if I wasn't anxious about this relationship that I really care about and I'm passionate about, I wouldn't put in the work for that relationship to work. So it helps. It is very helpful, but sometimes can become problematic when we experience it in situations that we don't need it. It's severe, it's all the time, it's time consuming. That's when it becomes a problem.
Wow. So we actually need mechanisms that help to keep it within the normal range. I don't know what it is that helps us the most, whether it's our thoughts, or whether it's other people saying to us, oh, you don't need to worry about that, or just, you know, do this. What's helpful thing to help us to stay within a normal range of anxiety?
Yeah. Well, in regards to people supporting you, I would always say it's always good to have a good connection with people, whether that's friends or family or a partner, whoever that person may be. But what I think is really important is for you to know that you don't need that reassurance from X, Y, Z in order to know that you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay anyway. Anxiety is not going to harm you in any way. And whilst it may be comforting to hear that from a loved one or a family member or a friend, we shouldn't have to rely on that. And the reason I say that's because I've worked with a lot of people where they rely on that reassurance. They're reassurance seeking all the time. They rely on people telling them that it's going to be okay, or that they're going to get through it, or that things are going to be all right. And that in itself can become a problem as well. So yes, it's helpful to have support, but we shouldn't have to rely on that support in order to know that we're going to be okay.
Wow. So listening to that, I'm wondering then if there is something missing in our makeup, if we become the type of person that relies on constant reassurance, yet once the person stops saying what they're saying, it's as though we've forgotten all the reassurance that they're given and we're back to zero.
Yeah. Which is another reason why it's not helpful, because we need it all the time once we become reliant on it. So that in order to feel okay. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's something missing in our makeup. I would probably say it becomes like a habit, or it becomes something that you become used to, so it's habitual to you. And also it depends on different people's personality styles. So some people have a personality where naturally they're more inclined to kind of need that reassurance, whereas some people may be a bit more independent, may not need that as much. So there's a combination of factors at play here. So your personality type, you have habits that you've developed over the period of time, your relationships with people, that have an impact on that.
Wow. Okay. So then let's look at what's the signs and symptoms of anxiety. How does it manifest? How would I know? Or would there be any doubt in my mind if I was suffering from anxiety, or would I know beyond a shadow of a doubt?
You'd probably know without a shadow of a doubt, really. Because I think of all the kind of mental health disorders that they are, anxiety is the most physical of them all. And when we're feeling anxiety, adrenaline is being released into our body. So literally a hormone is being released into our body that causes that fight or flight response. And with that adrenaline, it's similar to the kind of energy that we get when we're working out. Like our heart might be racing, we might be feeling a bit breathless, people get dizzy sometimes, people feel shaky, or like their legs are jetty and they're not quite stable on their legs. Sometimes there's a tightness in chest. It's a very physical, people often talk about that feeling of dread, or that knot in their stomach, or butterflies in their stomach. All of those symptoms are common symptoms of anxiety. And for different people, there's different things. I've heard things as unusual as like a ringing in the ear, or headaches. Each person can experience anxiety in a different way, but some of those symptoms that I've just spoke about are the more common ones. So when you're feeling anxious, you're likely to know you're feeling anxious because it has a physical impact on how you feel. And then consequently, it has an impact on what you do. So you then might become very avoidant. You might want to avoid doing certain things, saying certain things. You might want to try and isolate yourself, not avoid situations which cause anxiety. So, like people who have fear of heights, or, all of that kind of thing, they'll avoid it because it causes anxiety. So yeah, anxiety is a very physical impact. It's caused by adrenaline in our body, and we can feel it in our body, but then it has an impact on what we then do as a result.
Wow. So I've heard people talking about anxiety attacks. So is an anxiety attack dangerous?
No, it's scary, it's horrible, it's uncomfortable, it's scary, it feels like you're gonna, often with anxiety, we have catastrophic thoughts. And catastrophic thoughts are things like, oh, I'm having a heart attack, my heart's racing, or I'm going to pass out, I can't cope, I can't breathe. We have those sort of catastrophic thoughts with anxiety, but it's not actually dangerous. And it's very funny you asking me that, because I was literally having this conversation on Friday, and someone was talking about panic attacks that they have. And they were thinking that if they had a panic attack, if left unchecked, that they would die. And I'm like, no, you're not going to die. It feels uncomfortable, it feels scary, but actually it's quite impossible for you to die, because our anxiety is so high, our blood pressure is higher, like it's quite impossible for something to happen, something significantly like dying to happen in a situation where you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. What's more likely to happen is that you may actually pass out sometimes, or you may feel quite faint, but you're not going to die. That is the one thing that's for certain. You won't die after an anxiety attack or a panic attack. But of course, anxiety for long periods of time, and when I say long periods of time, I mean years, at high levels can result in, high blood pressure, and high blood pressure can lead to cardiovascular problems, which is where the kind of health issues come in. But anxiety in itself is not dangerous, and you won't die from it.
Wow. Well, that's reassuring. I'm sure viewers are I know some people that they're having a heart attack, like that coming out through their mouths or something.
Yeah.
So then, yes, go on.
I was just going to say there's a difference between an anxiety attack and a panic attack as well. So
tell us the difference.
An anxiety attack they're similar in that you both feel the physical sensations like your heart racing and breathlessness and tightness in chest. But anxiety attack tends to be more lower level, and for a short period of time, and normally passes quite quickly. But I guess the most significant difference with an anxiety attack and a panic attack is your thoughts. So with a panic attack, that's when it's often associated to those catastrophic thoughts. So I am going to die, or I am having a heart attack, or something bad is going to happen as a result of this. And the symptoms tend to be a lot more severe and a lot more high and more scary for people. But there is a difference. Sometimes people say they're having a panic attack, and actually it's not a panic attack, it's just an anxiety attack.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess when you're having an attack, it doesn't make much difference which one it is real for the person having it.
Yeah.
Wow. So how would anxiety attacks or high levels of anxiety affect your day-to-day life? Would it stop you from being able to live a normal life?
For some people it can be. So there's agoraphobia, where agoraphobia literally prevents you from wanting to go outside. So that's when people literally can't step outside their front doors. So for some people it can be as severe as literally not being able to go outside, and that could be for like a combination or lots of different reasons about what that fear is or that worry is if they do step outside. But for other people, and it really depends on the type of anxiety disorder you're experiencing as well. For other people it might just kind of impact the way that they live their life. So someone who's experiencing social anxiety, they have anxiety in social situations, is kind of in the title, and they fear maybe being judged or negatively received, or they just fear people's opinions of them. So they might then avoid social situations. They might be someone who typically doesn't have a lot of friends, doesn't socialize a lot, will always say no to social invites, will tend to be a homebody kind of person, and that will then impact how they live their life. So if they may go to work or to university, wherever they are in life, they may really struggle to form connections with people or to make friends because they're so anxious about that social aspect of life. So that's one way that anxiety can affect behavior. Or there might just be different situations where you just avoid it. Going back to that example I gave earlier about heights, if you're scared of heights, you might just avoid it altogether. Or you might have safety behaviors. So those are behaviors that kind of help you to manage anxiety in stressful situations, but then also become problematic. And really common with safety behaviors might be things like what I hear all the time is that, oh, I have to have my earphones. If I'm going out and about, or if I'm using public transport, I have to have my earphones and I have to listen to music in order to feel okay, or to feel like I'm managing my anxiety, because it's kind of distracting me from what's going on in the here and now. Or like I have to carry a water bottle, so if I get really hot and flustered, I can have some water and that's going to help me to calm down. Or like if they're out, they have to sit near exits. That's a common one where people go out to situations. I have to make sure they know where the exit is at all times and how they're going to escape and how they're going to get out. So yeah, anxiety can really have an impact on how you live your life, and depending on what type of disorder it is, can actually stop you from going out altogether.
Wow, do you know what? That sounds a little bit like going through the menopause. You know,
Which one, the water?
Water. I had to have I had to have tissues. Oh my gosh, I had to have those things to feel comfortable to go out. And
so they're all your safety behaviors, Pastor Yvonne?
Yeah.
They're all your safety behaviors.
Not anymore. I used to have a fan in every bag. Now, I can't tell you the last time I used a fan. When I was going through it, I needed to check my bag before I left the house, because if I left the house and realized I had taken the fan with me, then that would give me anxiety. So what would happen? Flush. Yeah. So I can really identify with those things. Now, earlier on, you spoke a little bit about exposure. If somebody had a phobic reaction to spiders, etc. But what sort of things can you teach somebody or share with somebody that's going to help them to decrease their anxiety levels and to be able to function in normal, I was going to say normal society. Is there a normal society anymore? I don't know. But you know what I mean, in situations.
I think I'll cover some general tips, but again, what will be helpful for someone with anxiety really depends on the type of anxiety problem that they're experiencing. So something that I'd recommend for social anxiety would be different from what I'd recommend for PTSD, for example. But the common thing with anxiety across all anxiety disorders is that the physical impact of anxiety and how it physically makes someone feel. So I'd always recommend relaxation and breathing exercises for that. So always get some sort of breathing exercise that works well for you. And for different people, different exercises work best. One that I commonly recommend all of the time is something called squared or box breathing. And with that, it's literally, you can be my little demonstrator if you want, Pastor Yvonne, and do it for with that, it's, you breathe in for a count of 4 seconds, and then you hold. Don't do it just yet. You hold your breath for a count of 4 seconds, and then you slowly breathe out for a count of 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath again for a count of 4 seconds. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. When you're breathing in, you're taking a deep, slow breath in for 4. You're not just going, you're kind of breathing in for 4 seconds. And when you're breathing out, you're kind of breathing out slowly for 4 rather than going. Does that make sense? Okay, so deep breath in, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, slow breath out, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, deep breath in, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1, slow breath out, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1. And that's something that I'd recommend you do for a few minutes. How did that feel just doing it twice?
It actually felt, number one, that I gained some kind of space, that I'd slowed things down, and that I had time to think in between the breaths to actually feel, you're okay, I'm okay. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and that's why I recommend that one all the time, because you can literally do it for a minute and already start to feel the benefit of doing it. And for, especially when breathlessness tends to be a big part of anxiety, it really helps to regulate your breathing. And it brings about that sense of calm and that sense of relaxation. And like you said, allows you to think a bit clearly about things. because often when you're feeling anxious, your thoughts are racing, you're thinking about 101 things at the same time, and focusing on the counting really helps to slow things down so that you feel a bit better. So that would be the first thing about anxiety that I'd say. Work on managing the physical sensations. The second thing that I would say is your thoughts. And I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about thoughts later on, but work on your thoughts. Because with our thinking is so powerful to how we feel. And with anxiety, we often tend to have those catastrophic thoughts. So we think the worst is going to happen. We think we can't cope. We think that everything's going to go wrong. We think that we're going to pass out. We think that things will never be the same again. We have really negative, really unhelpful thoughts. And that can be so powerful in how anxious you feel. So if someone's thinking, oh, there's no point, it's never going to work out, things are going to be terrible, I can't cope, they're going to feel anxious. That's understandable that they would feel anxious. So if you notice that your thinking is particularly negative or catastrophic in any way, try to begin to challenge those thoughts by looking at the evidence that supports that thought to be true or not to be true. Like, what is the factual evidence? And not based on how you feel, because our feelings can say, yeah, it's going to happen because I just feel it's going to happen. That's not true. Use your facts. What facts do you have that supports that catastrophic thought to be true or not to be true? And that's one way that you can begin to work on those anxious thoughts that you have. And then the last way that I would say is that's your physical sensations, your thoughts, and then your behavior. Work on what you're actually doing or not doing. So if you notice that your anxiety is telling you not to do something, do the opposite. If your anxiety is telling you to avoid, not to go and do that thing. So those are 3 things to be mindful of, I think, when working on trying to tackle anxiety.
Wow. So you said anxiety would be different than somebody with PTSD.
Yeah.
So what kind of lesson would you teach or share with somebody with post-traumatic stress? Because I remember much earlier on, we were actually looking at the fact that many people feel as though they're suffering from post-traumatic stress just from going through this COVID. So that might be helpful for some of the people listening today, if you could share that.
Okay. First thing I'm going to say, though, about that is that PTSD is a very specific type of disorder. And often people say they've got PTSD, but they don't have PTSD. They're experiencing anxiety in relation to trauma. Okay. So I think for a lot of people, COVID, this whole time, lockdown has been very traumatic. It's been a traumatic experience. And as a result, we feel anxious about it. But with PTSD, that's when it's characterized by nightmares. So you're having nightmares about something. You're having flashbacks about the traumatic incident. You're hyper vigilant. You're hyper aware. You're having all of these negative, unhelpful thoughts, which is a lot different from just having anxiety in relation to trauma. So with PTSD, as a CBT therapist, different therapists work on this in different ways. For me, what we work on is trying to process that trauma, because when you experience PTSD or traumatic incident, often we can kind of get caught in a time loop almost. So we're caught in a time loop in our minds. We feel like we're still at that trauma incident. We feel like we're still at that space where that trauma happened. And I can use a car accident as a really good example of that. So when you've got PTSD in relation to a car accident, it can feel like you're back in that time and space time and time again. So you might avoid using cars or doing anything with cars because it just brings back that memory. You have nightmares about that crash happening at the very same point where the cars collided, or you have flashbacks where it feels like you're back in that moment, and you might be very sudden with your movements, or you might be doing different behaviors because it feels like you're back in that moment. And that's more so PTSD rather than trauma. So with trauma, which I think is what a lot of people have experienced with COVID rather than PTSD, I would say to talk about it and to connect with people who also can relate to how you feel. And I feel like as people in general, we don't really like to talk about our emotions. So we don't really like to talk about how we're feeling and how we're thinking about things. We like to just kind of shut up and get on with it almost. But I really think in relation to COVID and the things that we've been through in these past 6 months, it's really important that we do just stop and connect and really talk about how you're feeling and how it felt, because it really helps you to begin to process that trauma, but also think about some ways that you can get through it and what you're actually grateful for, because some of our fears at the beginning of lockdown probably haven't been fears that have been realized. For some people it has been, so talking about it really allows you to put some of those fears and those worries that you had into perspective.
Wow,
that was a lot. Did you get that?
yes, it was excellent, because what I was hearing was that one of the things that we can really do to help ourselves the best is to talk about what we've been feeling, what we've been going through, not even looking to the other person to give us answers as such. Just the activity of expressing our fears, our feelings, is actually going to help us and reduce the level of stress and anxiety within our bodies. So that was very, very good. Thank you. So I also heard you mentioning nightmares and dreams and stuff. So anxiety actually invades our sleeping time, on our quality of sleep, our length of sleep. What would you say?
Yeah, so anxiety can have a massive impact on how people sleep and their quality of sleep as well. And the reason it does have such a powerful impact because anxiety is caused by adrenaline. And you know, adrenaline is that hormone that helps us to feel alert. So that's why it has an impact on our sleep, because literally you're trying to sleep, but hormones in your body saying be awake, be alert. So that's the reason why we often have sleep problems with anxiety. But I often say there's a combination of reasons, and I tend to kind of develop a sleep hygiene with someone who's experiencing problems with sleep. And it could just be down to like the simpler things like having a regular sleep routine. So a regular time that you go to sleep and a regular time that you wake up, and actually sticking to that. So even if you've had the worst night's sleep and you've been up all night and you haven't been able to sleep, if you said that you was going to get up at 7:30 a.m, get up at 7:30 a.m. Because what your body quickly learns is that actually, do you know what, I need to be sleeping between 11 and 7:30 because I'm not going to have any time during the day to kind of catch up on that sleep. I'm not going to be napping during the day. So I need to create this new routine for my body. So being really strict and rigid almost with your sleeping time. So when you're waking up and when you're going to sleep, even when you've had a terrible night's sleep, which I know is the hardest thing to do. And sometimes when I say that to people, they look at me like, what? But it does really help. I'd also say to be mindful of the sleep environment that you have. Like, I know for myself in my bedroom, my bedroom is west facing. So that means as soon as the sun's up, I'm up, because the light just streams into my room. So be really mindful of your sleep environment and make sure that it's kind of cohesive to sleep in. So if that means changing your blinds or changing your pillows or changing your bed, having a comfortable mattress, all of those little things have a massive impact on how well we sleep or not. And then the other thing that I'd recommend is keeping a diary next to your bed. So often when people say they're struggling to sleep or struggling to fall asleep, it's because they're thinking about 101 things at night. They're thinking about everything that they've got to do the next day, or they're just worrying about, you know, the bills or the children or whatever it is that they're worrying about, and that's keeping them up at night. So I often say to kind of write that down in your notebook. And say to yourself, I will come back to you and I will think about you, but not right now. Right now, it's time for me to sleep. But it kind of allows you to take those thoughts out of your mind and put it onto a piece of paper, which kind of allows you then to be able to fall asleep and to relax a little bit more, because you know it's somewhere else, you know it's recorded, you know you're not going to forget about it. But right now, it's just time for you to sleep instead of worry or to be thinking about those things. So definitely have a little journal that you keep next to your bed, and try to avoid using any electronics. So your phone, your tablets, your laptops, put them away, and don't use them.
How long before bedtime should you put those things away?
I personally would recommend at least an hour, about an hour, because your body kind of needs, and your mind especially, needs that time to wind down and to kind of get over that system or, you know, device that you are using, especially as the lights that are emitted from our phones and our tablets are kind of lights that emit to us, oh, it's time to be awake, it's time to be alert. So in order to kind of get you into that sleepy, time to sleep routine, I'd say try to not to use it an hour before bedtime. That's not realistic for a lot of people. So I'd say if not an hour, at least 15 to 20 minutes before bed. And what I do, I have do not disturb on my phone. So from certain hours, I just won't get any messages. I won't get any calls. They will be coming through, but I just won't get alerted by it because I know that it's just time for me to kind of wind down and get ready to sleep. So do something like that if you need to.
So is there anything else that you would add to your nighttime routine apart from putting away electronic devices? We've already spoken about the bed, the pillows, the curtains that stop the light from coming through too early. What else would you recommend that people do as they're winding down for the night to go to bed?
Well, I would definitely say that winding down, there needs to be actually a process of that, because sometimes we kind of like have a really hectic and busy day and we jump straight into bed and we think that sleep's going to come. And sometimes it does because you're so knackered and you've had such a long day. But often it takes you a while to wind down. So you need to have like a wind down routine. So unless this is where that kind of the hour before bed might come in. So that hour before bed, it might be that you're no longer using your devices, you're having a cup of non-caffeinated tea, you know, you've had a shower or something, you're changing to pajamas, you're reading a book, you're having your prayer time, and you're kind of getting ready to go to sleep, and you're having that literal wind down routine rather than just like jumping from a busy day straight into bed thinking that sleep's going to come, because it doesn't always come. What I would also say as well is that our bedrooms need to be for specific purposes only. So often people, especially I think during lockdown when people were at home, people are working in their bedrooms, they're sleeping in their bedrooms, they're eating in their bedrooms, everything is in their bedroom. And the bedroom is really for two things. So sleeping's one of them. So that's what married couples are. I'd say make sure your room is for your only use for those two purposes rather than it being everything, because if you're trying to sleep in a room but you know you're also working and you're thinking about everything that you've got to do next day at work, it's going to really help. It's going to really struggle to fall asleep the next day. So make sure that your room is just for sleeping. And I think the last thing that I would recommend, which is also a really hard technique to practice in person, I'm seeing there's a question, what's the other thing bedrooms are used for? Pastor Yvonne, as a married person, you could answer that question.
That the other thing that the bedroom is used for is for companionship and for spending intimate time with your spouse. So there's no doubt about that. Okay. Now we've also had a comment from somebody called Graham. He says, I am ex-army and suffered from PTSD. It has subsided, but every so often I get an attack. I have been told that I will never get over it and will have it all my life. Is this true?
The first thing I would say, Graham, is, or ask, I'd want to know more about is, have you ever had therapy for it? Because I feel like therapy can be so powerful with PTSD, especially for, you know, ex-military personnel who commonly do have PTSD when they return home. Because I would say if you haven't, have some therapy. And although there's a variety of therapies available out there, I do think that the type of therapy that I personally do is one of the best for PTSD. So CBT and or something called EMDR. EMDR recycling, I think that's what it is. I forget what R stands. No, right, sorry. And EMDR, it's not even really therapy. It's more about the eye movement. So literally the way that our brain processes information. So when you're having EMDR, there's literally lights set up and you're using your eyes to kind of process the trauma that you've received. So Graham, if PTSD has been something that you've experienced for many, many years, and you have had different types of therapy, if you haven't had it, it's available on NHS. and it is available through the GP. So speak to your GP about it and they can refer you to the correct service for that. Because I don't feel like it has to be something that you experience forever. I feel like trauma memories will be something you always have, like you'll always remember those traumatic experiences. But the symptoms of PTSD, like the nightmares and the flashbacks and all of that, no, I truly believe that you can work on those and not have to experience them for the rest of your life.
Well, Graham, I wish you all the best of luck with contacting your GP.
In this time, yeah.
They seem to have gone off radar.
Yeah.
But as Chanel has said, you can get help on the NHS. So it's not something that you need to pay for. And CBT or EMDR are the best therapies to help you to have the breakthrough that you need. So Chanel, our time is really, really running away from us. And this isn't really enough time. Maybe you have to come back because we haven't even touched on thought patterns and how we can change thought patterns. We've literally only got a couple of minutes. So I don't know if you want to say something quickly, and then we can have you to come back and we will do the whole session just on thought patterns and how we change those.
Yeah, okay. So with thought patterns, I think over many years, we tend to get into unhelpful thinking habits, as I call them. And going back to what I said earlier in terms of thinking about where this comes from, we can look back to our early experiences and maybe the way that our parents thought about things, or the way that they said things, or the way that they just behaved, then contributes to the kind of the core beliefs that we develop as people. And we can have positive or negative core beliefs. And core beliefs are those kind of overriding internal beliefs that we have about ourselves. And they can be like, I am good enough. That's a, you know, a more positive one, or a more balanced one. Or a negative one might be that internal belief that, you know, I'm a failure, or I'm not good enough. And they can then impact on the kind of unhelpful thinking habits that we develop, and which we tend to display and exhibit for many years. So it literally becomes a habitual way of thinking that we automatically think without even having to think about it. It's just there. And we have different styles. So like there's one called critical self. And critical self is when we are very hard on ourselves. So nothing that we do is ever good enough. So I am not good enough. I'm a failure. Nothing ever goes right for me. People don't like me. Those kind of thoughts called critical self kind of beliefs. And then we have, I mentioned a lot already about catastrophizing. So thinking the absolute worst is going to happen. Or we have emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is when our thoughts are very much based on how we feel emotionally. So it is bad because I feel bad. It is terrible because that's just how I feel. You know, things aren't good because I don't feel good, kind of thing. So we have lots of different unhelpful thinking habits that we display over many years. And I think what would be really important for people to do is to become aware of that habit, become aware of that style of thinking that you may or may not do, because not everyone has these. And once you become aware of them, you can begin to do something different about it. But you need to be aware of what they are first, so that you can begin to challenge them. So if I'm becoming aware that actually, do you know what, I am really hard on myself. When I start to notice that I'm thinking bad about myself, or I think, oh, Shan, you're not going to do this, or you're terrible, I can catch that thought and I can think, do you know what, true, I can challenge it. I can start to think about other alternative beliefs, alternative perspectives that contribute, that contradict that negative thought being true. And I can come up with a more balanced thought, a more realistic thought. And I always say balance and realistic rather than positive thinking, because I don't think positive thinking is realistic long term. We can't always think positively, especially when we don't live in a positive world. Bad things do happen. So we can't think positively all the time, but we can be really realistic about things, and we can be balanced about things rather than it being all bad or all good. You know what, it's just okay. So firstly, be aware, start to become aware of those unhelpful thinking styles you might be doing. Once you become aware of it, begin to challenge those thoughts that you're having, and actually look at the evidence for those thoughts to be true or not to be true. And once you've done that, come up with a more balanced thought, a more realistic thought, actually is going to be more helpful to that situation that you may be in. And as a whistle-stop tour, I would probably say that those are the best 3 things to do to work on unhelpful thoughts and negative thoughts.
Wow. Well, I do think it would be helpful if you would come back again and go into detail into how we can alter or change the narrative, because most of us have got a tape recorder playing in our heads, don't we? And when things are bad, that's when it pops out and it gets switched on, and we hear all the negative things about ourselves, how we failed here, how we know we're not going to manage to do this and we're not going to do that. And I think we could all benefit with chucking out that old tape. I mean, most of us haven't even caught up with CDs yet, you know, it's still the old tape brain. Well, right now we need to be up with Blu-ray, right? Well, Chanel, we're nearly all out of time, but it's been absolutely amazing today. You've shared so much regarding anxiety attacks, panic attacks, PTSD, OCD. We've learned that anxiety is a general term for anxiety, which covers a range of things. And I'm sure people were relieved to know that. And that when anxiety goes past a certain scale, then it becomes a clinical issue. But before that, it's just a normal life issue, because we actually need anxiety to function. And then you mentioned that anxiety is the most physical of all of the mental difficulties that we have. I've been taking notes. Can you see?
I can see you looking at your notes. It's good.
Agoraphobia. You didn't mention claustrophobia, but I think we have to put those 2 things together, because agoraphobia is fear of going out into wide open spaces. Claustrophobia is being
more confined places,
closed places. And then you talked about exposure, which is I think they used to call it desensitizing.
It's
exposure. Right.
It's very similar to desensitization.
And then you actually taught us a relaxation breathing technique, which is very good. And if people have got Apple Watches, there's a breathing app on there, which is really, really good. So they can use that. You taught us squared box breathing. And then you've talked about the fact that most people who think they're suffering with PTSD are actually suffering from anxiety in relation to trauma, and it's not bona fide PTSD. And then one of the best parts for me is, because I love to sleep, so you talked about sleep hygiene and also having a nighttime routine. And I must confess, I do have that, switch off notifications by a certain time, but then I'm very naughty and I'll pick the phone up. I will use it. And I realize it does affect how I sleep and how I fall asleep. But what I do find really, really helpful is having the notebook, and everything that I'm worried I'm going to forget for doing tomorrow or this week, if it's all written down, it's like a weight is taken off my shoulders, and I can just go to sleep. And you also mentioned EMDR, which I hope was helpful for Graham, who sent in his comments. Right now, we have a few minutes for you just to say whatever else it is that you want to say to reassure our audience, our viewing audience out there, any advice or counsel that you'd like to give. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you to pray for everyone who's suffering with anxiety or becoming increasingly anxious because of the likelihood, and I'm saying the likelihood because I am praying against another lockdown. We don't need another lockdown. It's the last thing that we need. So I'm praying against it, but it doesn't stop us from worrying that it's going to happen. And of course, there's so many other things in life that bring about anxiety. So I'm going to ask you, after you've said what you want to say, just to pray for all of our viewers out there.
Thank you. I think the last thing that I would probably say is just to think about the 5 steps to well-being. And the 5 steps to well-being is something that's kind of widely publicized and known about in the kind of mental health or psychology field. So it's not necessarily my steps, but they are really good steps. And the 5 steps are, the first one is connect. And that's what we were talking earlier about, you know, connecting with people and talking. In order to look after your mental health and well-being, you really need to be connecting with people, whoever that person may be. So whether that's a friend, family member, partner, you know, a pastor, someone that you're connecting to and forming a healthy bond and relationship with, so that you can talk to them when needed, and not just in hard times, but just in general, having that connection with someone. And the second one is exercise. So exercise is so powerful for our bodies and our mental health, so physical health and mental health. And when we're exercising, feel good hormones called endorphins are being released into our body. So they literally make you feel good. And you never regret doing exercise, but you always regret when you don't do it. So I'd always say to make sure you have some form of exercise in your life. And it doesn't have to be the gym, because I'm definitely not a gym person. It could just be a walk. It could just be yoga. It could be something, but just some form of exercise would be great. The third thing is give, and give is literally giving to yourself, but most importantly, giving to others. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a form of a monetary donation, although you can give in money form, or, you know, donate to charity and all of those things. But it can be those little things. And again, when we're feeling good, when we're giving, activation, feel good hormones are being activated into our brain, so it helps to make us feel better. So give in a small way. Could be a smile to a stranger as you're walking down the street. The next one is take notice, or mindfulness. So being present. So when we're worrying, we tend to be in the future, worrying about what might happen, or when we're feeling a bit down or depressed, we can sometimes be in the past, thinking about everything that's gone wrong. And take notice of being mindful is that literally being present in the here and now. Let me focus on what's going on around me rather than what is to come or what's already happened. And I think that will be really important in relation to an impending lockdown or not. If that happens, like you pray, we hope that doesn't happen. We pray that doesn't happen. And the last one is learn. So always take the opportunity to learn new skills, new techniques. It might be some of the things that we've talked about today. Try and, you know, go and Google them and, you know, look at them in a little bit more detail. If you Google unhelpful thinking habits, so many stuff will come up on that. So always making sure you're trying to learn in new ways. It could just be, you know, a new dish, or, you know, a new language if you want to go that extreme, or, you know, even a new instrument. But designed in some ways for your brain to learn, because it needs that kind of stimulation. So those are my 5 steps that I would say are really important to manage mental health and well-being. Connect, take notice, learn, exercise, and give. And those 5 steps. I didn't say them in the same order, but those are the 5 steps altogether. So now, should I pray? Are we ready to pray and close? Or
yes, just before you pray, apparently we've had a lot of comments saying how good this has been and how helpful it is, and that you have done a great job, Chanel. So yes, now pray a great prayer.
I can see a comment saying praying. Hilarious. All right, so thank you, God, for everyone that has joined us on this live today, and everyone that will be watching later on, Lord God. We thank you that you are God, that you are a powerful God, that you are all-seeing and all-knowing God. I pray that for everyone who is experiencing anxiety, Lord, that they will remember that you have not given them a spirit of fear, Lord God, and that in your word you said to be anxious for nothing. I pray that you will help us to give the strength, Lord God, to begin to do things, do techniques, do skills, Lord God, that will help us to manage our mental health and our well-being, and to know that we can do all things through you. Lord God, I pray that you will help us to have that confidence to talk to people, to connect to people, to reach out to people, in order to manage our mental health and any difficulties that we may be experiencing. Lord God, I pray a blessing upon everyone watching and everyone to watch later. I pray that they will be blessed and that they will know peace in all areas of their life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Chanel. It's been outstanding.
Thank
Somebody
you.
put a comment saying fabulous and exceptional.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
If they put their money where their mouth is. Oh,
Wow.
that's from the bishop. That's from the bishop. So you know where money, okay. But thank you so very much for being our guest today. It's
Thank you
been
for
a
having
blessed
me.
information, has been very, very good quality. And we look forward to welcoming you back so that we can talk in detail about our thought patterns, how we can change the narrative, and what we can actually say to ourselves to help us to move forward. So thank you once again, and
Thank
we will
you.
be back next week with the next episode of Let's Talk About Health and Wellbeing, and we will let you hear all about that during the week. So watch out for us on your favorite social platform. We will be there. God bless you, and thank you so much. Thank you, Chanel. God bless
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.